On the left, DIY casters that work. On the right, an earlier version that doesn't work. I have 6 or 7 sets of muscle rack shelving, and that many means I can't afford the $100 a pop for off-the-shelf store-bought casters. So I went through several iterations of casters that don't work, starting off with mostly printed versions that worked only up to a certain amount of weight, and then eventually working up to that failed iteration that you saw a moment ago that has aluminum square tubing with plywood inserts and a mixture of screws and epoxy. And it could stand more weight than the 3D printed only versions, but not as much weight as I needed it to withstand. So I finally figured out how to do an affordable DIY caster that involves an EMT tube bought from the big box home improvement store. And EMT tubing is sold based on internal diameter. And so this is a 1/2 inch inside diameter EMT tubing. Again, it's very affordable. And even a single stick of it will make quite a few sets. So this is a combination of welding a little strip of EMT tubing onto the bottom of the uprights, the bottom of the verticals, and then inserting a 3D printed plastic sleeve or insert into the EMT, and then finally screwing the stem of the caster into that printed insert. I've attached these to several shelves and have loaded them down with a considerable amount of weight, and I have yet to have any of these fail. You start by grinding the paint off of the bottom of the upright so that the welding can take place and have good grounding, and then after that we'll get into the welding. I should mention I am not even an amateur welder, and I'm sure that anybody with welding experience could do a better job on these than I've done. But it's withstood the test of time. I've had quite a bit of time and quite a bit of weight on these casters done this way, and I have yet to see them fail. So my welding may not look very good, but it seems to be doing the job on holding up over time. A couple of pointers regarding your prep work. When you take your grinder to grind the paint off of the uprights, you want to grind a little extra so that you have room to connect your grounding for your welder. And also, you want to kind of more rub/buff that paint off as opposed to grinding metal off. These uprights, the metal on these muscle rack shelves is not super thick, and you don't want to cut away any thickness of this metal with your grinder. You just want to kind of scrape that paint off. And so the fewer sparks you can make, the better while you're getting the paint off of the upright. Another tip in your prep work is I have a deburring tool, but I forgot to use it. And so later I wound up having to use something to try to deburr the inside of that EMT conduit so that I could get the plastic insert to fit. Also, in editing this video, I'm noticing that in previous efforts, I ground the paint off the outside of the bottom of the uprights, and this time I forgot to do that, but it seemed to have worked okay. Regarding the cleanup work done with a grinder, no two are the same, and sometimes I did more cleanup or less cleanup, depending. One more tip about your welding: you want to be careful not to weld any obstruction across the bottom of the entrance to that EMT conduit. By contrast, at the top, the EMT opening on that end doesn't matter at all. You can cover as much of it up as you want to. trying to get this nut tightened into place winds up with a very narrow opening between what you're coming up against and this face here. And there's a very slender wrench that comes with this set of casters that is made to slip into that tiny opening. And if you lose that wrench or misplace it, as I have done, you wind up having to come up with some really clever workarounds to try to get the caster tight without that wrench. You can start off tightening it with any pair of pliers or any crescent wrench, but as the space starts getting tight, you have to start trying to wedge a screwdriver in here and spin based on these little protrusions on this part that is attached to the stem. Also, you notice that I had to hammer in those printed plastic inserts. You want a really tight fit on those, and also you want a tight fit where the threads go into the plastic, so that the fit is so tight that although I can get it started into the printed threads, pretty soon I need leverage help from a tool to get it in much more. I will mention too that if you're having trouble getting it threaded in, that one of the easiest things to do is to hit the plastic with a heat gun and get it a little bit warm and soft, and then thread your stem in. And that is looking like something that I need to do to this one. Link in the description to this handy dandy heat gun. I can't remember. I think I may have used epoxy glue on the earlier ones. So I may have to drill a little hole and put kind of a pin or something in there to keep the plastic insert from spinning while I'm trying to get the part threaded into it. Okay, so I'm going to try to use what I think is an M3 screw as almost kind of a temporary grub screw. I'm going to have to move up to the next bigger bit. Let's try a 7/64 bit. Okay, so for an M3 screw, looks like a 7/64 bit is what I needed. And I've hopefully got this in far enough that it's going to serve as a bit of a grub screw. Okay, so far it looks like it is keeping the printed insert from sliding around. So just like that, I'm already too tight. So now I'll see if I can go the rest of the way by using these little notches. The last time I did this, I was able to use these notches to spin it the rest of the way. So just like that, we now have this caster attached to a 3D printed insert inside a welded piece of EMT conduit. And again, this design, the conduit is much longer than the plastic insert, and that's just so that I can get welds in 3 places: below the first keyhole set, in between the first and second keyhole set, and above the second keyhole set before the third one. And I have yet to have one of these fail on me. Now the truth of the matter is that if I wanted to go crazy loading the shelves down as heavy as I possibly could, I could probably get the shelving to fail, but I tend to think it would fail by the actual vertical bar of the muscle rack name brand shelving bending and kinking if you try to move it, either while the wheels are locked or while the wheels are on carpet, or while something is blocking the wheel and you try to move it. You could actually, this metal is not very thick. So I'll just tell you, if you have the money to buy the super thick, the shelves with the super thick metal, spend the money and get the super thick metal. But if you need a lot of shelving like I did and you can't spend a fortune on it, then you make do with what you can afford, which in my case was the affordable muscle rack shelving. And I wanted it to be something that I could move around if I needed to get to it. For instance, in my basement, sometimes my basement takes on water and I have to move stuff around to clean it up, which is what I'm doing now. And so I wanted casters on them. It's not something that you can always move the shelf when it's loaded down real heavy with the wheels on it. But if you can only have to unload part of the shelves and not all of them, and then move the shelving and then reload the shelves back up. But I've had real good success with this this way of attaching the caster. So now what I just did there, I've got to do it 3 more times, and I'll be ready to reassemble a muscle rack shelving set with newly installed casters that are much better and stronger than my earlier iteration with aluminum, square tubing, and plywood inserts. This has been Doug with Design 8 Studio, and if you like our content, please click like and consider subscribing. And until the next video, I wish you happy making.